Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I think should start.
Hello.
Yeah. Stream. So I'll just give it a couple of minutes to make sure people are joining. Okay. So hello. So today marks the final day of our STEMPeers 2020 global virtual conference, and since the last weekend, we've had very informative informative panel discussions about the challenges and the transition stories by individuals at different career levels, starting from undergrad to graduate and postdocs, both academia and industry. And today's panel we will emphasize on the work-life integration that encompasses all the career levels and discuss some very relevant issues like balancing work and personal life, burnout issues, mental health issues, and also diversity and inclusion at workplace. So talking about diversity, we have a very diverse panel today with panelists all across the globe. So thank you all for joining us today. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Tracy Costello, who will be moderating the session today. So Tracy does a phenomenal job in mentoring STEMPeers fellows and beyond. And she is currently a private career coach for postdocs and also an executive coach for the STEMPeers Gurukul platform. She has a wide array of professional experience and has delivered keynote addresses and career development workshops at many universities and professional societies. So over to you, Tracy.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to have been asked to moderate this really important panel about integrating career and life. We have an amazing panel today to talk about how they've navigated this work-life integration, particularly in areas of parenting, mental health, diversity and equity and inclusion. And I want to thank all of you for participating. And I also want to send a thank you to the organizing committee who put this together. As we continue to see more gender equity in employment, this has also led to the necessity of more parity in this work-life integration, as well as some changes to the way that we parent. We have 5 generations in the workforce right now, and that is amazing. There's been no time ever that's been the case. We have increasing numbers within this youngest generation, and so that presents challenges. And navigating work-life balance within all of these contexts is challenging. The STEM community certainly has experiences with all the challenges, and the time within which one is in your early training or your early career is also the time when you're having getting married and having kids. Science is a global enterprise, so diversity, equity, inclusion must be at the forefront of our consideration. We know that without, well, let me say it the other way. We know that when we have diversity, that things like creativity, innovation, the bottom line is all enhanced in very positive ways. And I prefer positive, so let me say it that way. So we want to have all of that, and we need to have all of that. Layered into everything is challenges inherent in training, and certainly the mental health issues that are caused or exacerbated by that. And I think the biggest opportunity here today is that we're all together to engage in this dialogue. And I'm certain that we're all going to resonate with something in the messages today, and we're all going to be able to take another step forward on our respective paths. And that's yay. With all of that said, I want to invite each of our panelists to give a brief couple minute, 1 to 2 minutes of introduction, share an initial thought about how one of these topics, work-life balance, diversity, inclusion, mental wellness, burnout, anything like that has impacted your career. So I'm going to hand it over to the first one who's willing to jump in.
Hi, my name is Bharat Vadinathan. So I'm a senior scientist currently in the immunology department at EMD Saronno. Before this, I did my PhD in immunology from Cornell and did a postdoctoral stint at Yale University with Dr. Ruslan Medzitov. So for me, as Tracy pointed out, the word work-life balance should be rephrased as work-life integration, because the word balance kind of gives a false impression of binary, either or. And it necessarily does not have to be like that. Work has to be part of our life. And that's what I have tried to achieve in the last couple of years after I have transitioned from academia to industry, is trying to achieve integration of my work into my life, where I give 100% at work and take back 100% of myself at the end of the day from work back home, so that I can enjoy my personal life as well. And this is something that I've been striving for the last 2 years and has definitely made a big impact in my productivity in work as well.
Okay. Helene, Obi, or Jill?
My name is Helene van het Spijker. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak here. I really deeply care about this topic, so I really appreciate you organizing this. I'm currently a postdoc at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, and before that, I did my PhD at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. I think that for me, mental health has been something that I've always had to work on throughout my early career. And I've noticed that it's just very important to very consciously think about how you take care of your mental health in work. And when it comes to working in science, it can just be very challenging to take care of your mental health because running experiments, attending conferences, it tends to be very challenging, and you tend to experiments go wrong, and that's normal, but it's also hard to have to deal with disappointment. So I think taking care of mental health is crucial in order, first of all, to be a successful scientist, but also in order, to be able to live life happily as a scientist. So I think it's crucial that we talk about this. Yes.
Obi or Jill?
Oh, Obi. Okay. Hi, guys. So I'm Obi. My background is in medicine, public policy, and in finance. So I'm an MD on the other side of the doctor spectrum. So I've had my two colleagues on the PhD side. So it's good to douse it a little with the MD side. I currently function as technical lead for health policy at the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. The Commonwealth is it's an intergovernmental organization of about 54 countries. Mostly were former British colonies. So it ranges from Australia, Britain, the UK, Canada to Nigeria, Ghana, Fiji. So it's quite a mix of countries at different levels of development. So I currently function in public policy here at the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. I'll be speaking more towards mental health, drawing also from my own personal um, background and understanding, transitioning quite a bit from clinical practice to public policy, health policy, and global health. This rate of work, the pace of work is different, and the kind of impact you have on two sides of the spectrum, clinical medicine and in public policy, are quite different. So that will have a toll on a professional trying to make that transition or how you work around it. So I'll be happy to talk about mental health effects, some of what we see around burnouts in people working in public policy, and how you can manage that if you're an early career professional or making the switch or even being trained in public health, public policy as well. Thank you.
Yep. And Jill, I know you have a rich experience.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Hi, my name is Jill Ganetti, and I'm a professor of biological sciences at Hunter College in the City University of New York, with additional appointments at the Graduate Center in the Department of Biochemistry and in biology. I'm chair of the Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental biology PhD program at the CUNY Graduate Center. And I'm also an adjunct professor at the Cornell Medical School. My lab runs out of the Cornell Belfer Research Building. I'm a native New Yorker. I have been in science, loving science since about 1981. I went to the Bronx High School of Science, and then after in college was a dance major, but did a stint in one summer in a lab and fell in love with lab life. I have been in New York the entire time. So I went to State University of New York at Purchase, then followed that up with my graduate career at New York University, where I earned my master's and my PhD, and then went on to Columbia University to do my postdoctoral training with Carol Previs, working on the tumor suppressor gene and protein P53 at a time where we didn't know what it did. And I was charged with trying to figure out what it did, and was fortunate enough to be one of the discoverers that learned that it was a DNA binding protein and a transcription factor. And so the rest has been history.
Wow, that's really rich. So I think I'm going to start with you because that's a lot of hats that you wear on a daily basis. So maybe talking about or giving your perspective on, how you define that work-life integration or balance, if you can find some of that. Every job's unique, everybody's different, recognizing all those things. So, maybe also a little bit about how you recognize if you're out of that balance, or if you feel like things are getting challenging, and then certainly anyone who wants to chime in, let's do that.
Great. So yeah, all of the three topics are terrific, and I think I'll start with the integrating from all of them, because I think it's important for this work-life integration for myself as a Black woman to be able to integrate the diversity and bring my full self to work every day, not feeling shy. And that has taken a lot of time and a lot of years. I said I was a dancer, and so for a long time, that integration was difficult, and I would lie about being a scientist and always say I was a dancer at parties, because it was very difficult to talk about being a scientist. And I didn't want to manage that in a room with people when I was trying to just be a friend. And so I would take that off the table, and I was just a dancer. But I've since obviously become much more comfortable with myself as a person. And I would say even now with COVID, the integration has moved even further with no haircuts, COVID hair, really my authentic hair, my authentic self at the table today in this platform, my big fro self, integrating all of that, and integrating for mental wellness, that ability to get up in the morning and take a walk and to be one with some trees, to try to integrate some health into every day before I start having to balance and integrate everything. I did fail in my introduction to say an important component of the integration of myself. So I am a wife. I am a mother of 2 sons who are now grown up. One's in college, the other one's graduated college. So it's been integrating all of that, and integrating friendships, as I talked about. I have friends who were my friends as dancers, and so integrating my friends into my life as a scientist. What I feel does the best of that integration is recognizing that each day I just do my best. And some days that best may mean that I can't write a single word on a piece of paper and I'm just thinking about the words, or I'm walking to try to be able to think about the words and think about the science. Other days it may mean integrating, dealing with, a messed up email where the box is full, and trying to just manage that so I can begin to have correspondence. Other days it might be cleaning the freezers at work and shining things up so that my team can find things better, and I'm the one who's really managing that and understanding it. Other days it might be educating, it might be grading. And it's really just figuring out what I need to do best each day by prioritizing what's the thing that if I drop it today, it will mess up my life and other people's lives. So that's the one that has to come to the forefront. And when I had young children, that might mean that it was a completely parenting day and nothing else was happening that day, because really the prime focus was on my children's mental wellness or my children's physical wellness, and nothing else could take precedent. Whereas another day it might be that I have to get a grant in, and if I don't have that money, all of the people in my lab won't be able to survive. So, you know, anything in my household, really, it's everybody like, please just go away, because all the other side, if I can't do this, everything's gonna fall apart. There'll be no ability to manage anything or take care of life at home. So I think those topics are all great. And in terms of the diversity portion, I picked City University of New York because the diversity in the City University of New York was something that helped me to feel comfortable. I've struggled, certainly in sciences, very often being the only woman of color in the room, and feeling as if at CUNY it would be a little bit easier, although I must say I'm still the only Black woman in the Department of Biological Sciences at Hunter College. And still, as I look at pay parity and the parity of respect, I still see problems within my own university, but it certainly is easier, I think, than if I had chosen to go to an Ivy League or a Research One institution and I was fighting with the all white contingent and mostly male to try to gain the level of respect that I feel I've earned. And so, you know, it's earning that respect every day and fighting for that respect every day.
Thanks. That was a great way to integrate all of these topics. I want to take a step back and do a little more focus on that mental wellness and well-being. So I know Helene had a great comment earlier about that. So maybe tell me what you think wellness looks like, and a little bit about, you know, how to recognize, you know, how to keep a positive outlook if you're feeling that, you know, failure, which, you know, we're taught to fail over and over in science, right? So let me leave you with that much.
Yeah, I agree that this is something that you need to consciously think about. And for me, what I've noticed uh, is that it's important to talk to other people about stuff that could be bothering you. And that can be either, oh, my experiments aren't working and I feel like a failure, or it could be, you know, my white male supervisor isn't treating me with respect at all, and I need some help with that. And basically the way to deal with that is always to go and talk to other people, because it helps to talk about it. First of all, because you need to not feel like you're isolated and alone, because that's when mental health problems get worse. But it's also really important because other people can actually help you point towards solutions. So one of the things that I'm currently doing at the UMass Medical School is that I'm a postdoc representative for the diversity interest group. And that sort of stuff, being able to participate in that at work really helps me, because basically what it does is it gives me a platform to meet with other people who care about these topics as well. And that means that even if I have a week where all my experiments fail, I still get to have that positivity and that interaction. So I would definitely encourage everyone to make sure that these topics are always, that you're talking to other people at work about these topics.
Awesome. So I know, Obi, you said that some of your work centers around implementing change and making a difference. Can you talk a little bit more about that in the context of, you know, everything that we've talked about so far?
Absolutely, absolutely. So first is 2020 has been an exceptional year for many reasons, and it's been quite difficult for almost everyone, if not everyone. And so that's first thing to recognize that what we have, it's really a unique year. It's not how things have been. And even the best laid plans by December of 2019, most of which came falling crashing through by March, April, when lockdowns and the impact of COVID came. So 2020 is a year like none other. And just to put that as a background to what we're experiencing now, it will be very important for everyone to have that at the back of their minds and take it quote and unquote easy on yourself and the methods at which you're going to be evaluating yourself and your work. For many people who've had to, for instance, work in labs and work on site who can work from home, you agree that it's been quite a case of mental stress because you definitely can't come into the lab, you can't run your experiments, you can't do whatever you used to do before. And how to navigate that process has been quite tricky for many universities. People have resorted to testing more frequently. People have suspended much of the lab work, for more writing and more kind of teaching work. So just to put it out there that the yardstick with which we evaluated ourselves, the KPIs from 2019 and even before, might have to be evaluated a bit more closely in 2020 because the parameters with which we are working is absolutely very different. For many people who've had to work from home, there's also been the part of, are you trying to work from home or are you at home just trying to work in a pandemic? They're two very different things. When you're just at this point, we're just trying to do the best we can in the midst of a global pandemic. So I understand that's how we've been assessed, the quality of our work, why that still has to be prioritized. One needs to also very, very closely look at the mental health impact of what it means to work from home or work from very different places that we actually working from now. Before, for many people, home was a place where you come to rest after working, but now you have to carry out the same amount of work you do on your desk at home, and that can put a lot more stressors on yourself. Also, the kind of change many projects that you might have been running or we might have been running prior to now have had to take a whole lot of slowing down prior to now in the face of COVID as well. So how your funders, for instance, for your lab work or your project, the KPIs you set, 5-year plan, 2-year plans, all of that needs to be evaluated, just not just for project reporting or your work or your experiments, but for your own mental health. Because in a case where many of us as scientists, as medical people, are very driven A-type people, and we kind of think it's our fault. My experiment needs to be progressing at this rate. I need to have finished my paper at this rate. But 2020 is not the year for that. This is a year where we're just trying to keep safe, make sure we do the best we can within the available constraints that we have, and then push on with what we have. So I would just want to say it from that background, to say this is not the year to put that extra pressure on your mental health because you need to be alive and strong and keep safe. And then whatever it is by way of work, we can then recalibrate the indicators by which we measure productivity. That needs to be done very closely in view of our mental health and making sure that we're strong enough to keep doing the work. Thanks.
No, absolutely. And I like how you shaped some of that. And I want to ask Bharat for some of his tips on how he is able to, focus on work at work and focus, and then sort of make that mental shift and focus on home at home. And I know we heard some of that from Jill too, which was great. In this case, though, we are seeing that, some of our diversity has the potential to bleed out of science, and we're at risk of that, right? We see women and minorities and internationals particularly affected by and leaving their science roles to find something else in this space because of that pressure to keep at that same pace and that same level. So I want to hold that question and that thought And, maybe Jill, you've got some thoughts, and everybody else too. But first I want to tackle and jump into that, how do you find that work-life integration so that you can find some balance, or how do you have tips for making that mental switch? And then additionally, how can your company or university help create that environment, particularly with this work from home space that we have now, where, my office is 2 steps from the rest of my house, right?
Yeah, Tracy, great points. So in terms of tips for work-life integration that I personally have applied in my case and has worked for me pretty well, is that I have decided to have discipline in my life in terms of my work schedule. So I started a shift in my, previously I used to, as a postdoc, I would work very long hours. So when I moved into the pharmaceutical industry, I saw here that there was a conscious effort to having very disciplined time schedule. So I chose that. I am a morning person, and I decided that, okay, for 9 hours, I'll be at work, and those 9 hours are dedicated for work. And then there's a mental switch where I tell myself that after this, I will no longer do anything related to work. And the most important thing that I stopped doing was stop to check emails on my iPhone or my Android phone. Like, that's a big switch, because otherwise what happens is that you keep getting notifications of work emails even while you're driving back home or you're at home. So that um, digital well-being aspect is something that I have focused on. I've decreased my time on social media platforms, and also in terms of checking work emails. So that aspect definitely helped me to get a mental switch that on weekends or on after hours, say after 5 p.m., I would not be obligated to reply to my boss's email. And in that regard, what you told, what employers can do, what managers can do, is set the tone that they do not expect a reply for an email that is sent after work hours or on weekends. And in my case, I was lucky enough that my manager and my group's culture is as such, where we actually enjoy weekends. We look forward to long weekends. On Fridays before a long weekend, we discuss, like, with our colleagues, what are your plans? And no one feels ashamed talking about holidays and vacation, because it comes to a point where work is so much prioritized that going on a vacation is thought as if of taking away from your work. But I feel that it actually adds to your work. It brings new energy to what you do when you go back to work after a break. And it's very important to prioritize that. That is something that I have done, which has helped me. And in terms of, again, workplace environmental things which your manager is supposed to convey to you, is that we expect you to take vacation. And in Europe, it's actually in Germany, my company is a global company. We have members in Germany also, and they have mandatory vacation days. Like, if you do not take it, the HR gets involved. And this is absolutely not existent in the US, and even worse in India. So that aspect really needs to be there, that it is expected that you take your vacations. It is expected that you work the optimal hours that is required at full efficiency. But then after that, you're not required to answer to emails or do work outside of work hours. And that actually improves efficiency. In my case, I've seen that now what I get done in 8 hours is what I used to get done previously in 12 hours.
There certainly is great research and evidence on diminishing returns after working for so many hours. But I really liked what Jill had to say earlier too, about recognizing, this is sort of my mental space today, and I can do this. I can write the email, or I can, tackle that, or I can go clean the freezers, or, what's the thing that I have to get done today? So I want to touch back to that. So I want to take this really quick and ask a second question. And then I want to, frame that within, is there bias in the way that this happens? So some people have amazing mentors and can have this conversation about, I am going to work these hours and this is when I'm at my best, and I'm going to turn it off and focus on my personal or family or whatever after, this time, right? And maybe have that as an open conversation amongst everyone in the group, right? So that the people who work late in the afternoon recognize, okay, yeah, I'm going to send you that email at 5 o'clock, but I don't, or 6 or 7, but I don't expect you to answer until the next day when you're fresh. How do you have that conversation if you don't feel like your PI or your boss is, receptive to that? And then do we see that there's, or if there's bias in that space of, you're a parent, and so that's a bias sometimes, or if you're a woman, or if you're a minority, or if you're an international, or like, how do we deal with that? How do we tackle that, that atmosphere to make a positive change in this space? I'm going to open that up for anybody to tackle, because that's a that's a tough one.
Yeah, I think
I
that
definitely,
is.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And from the standpoint of how do we tackle it, it's such a big we. So there's the we from the standpoint of those of us who maybe are in managerial roles, as like myself, or the we from the standpoint of a person who's just picking a lab. And so I'll just start with how do we tackle that from the standpoint of just picking a lab, because I do remember when I was first thinking about picking my postdoctoral lab and trying to get a sense of what was the culture in different labs, because each lab does have a very different culture and each PI is a very different person. And unfortunately or fortunately, that's just the way it is in science. And so from the standpoint of how do we change it, it's really hard for me to think from that broader point. So more to think from the standpoint of when you're picking, how do you assess the tenor and the way a lab is run before you make that choice to go into a lab? And I think sometimes that isn't considered. Very often people are trying to take a lab that has the best international reputation, has published the most papers, and really the person looking feels so humbled by the fact that maybe they've been accepted into this terrific lab in the perspective of the manuscripts that have been published. They don't realize that that terrific lab maybe isn't so terrific for work-life integration for what you want your life to be, but might be terrific for that person who doesn't want any work-life integration and all they want to do is work 24 hours a day, and they feel so super special if the PI emails them at 11 and they're still in the lab, just as Bharat was talking about, because they're ashamed if they take a vacation, so they don't want to. So this is a great scenario for them. So that I knew wasn't the case for me. I knew that I wanted to have children. So I was asking those questions and remember being in the lab with the one woman who was in this lab that I was thinking about that was a terrific lab. I mean, the PI is probably one of the most amazing scientists around. But the woman was telling me how she would work. He would curse at people, and then she would run home to feed her child, put her child to bed, and go back. And I thought, I don't think this is what I want. And even though this is a terrific lab, I think I'm going to go with a lab where maybe I have a better position of getting the work-life integration that I want. So some of it, I believe, is at that level of making those choices that at the moment may not seem like the most prosperous choice scientifically, but might be a more prosperous choice for your integration and your mental wellness.
Elaine, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I actually completely agree that that's a really smart approach. When I applied for postdoc positions, one of the things that I did is I really insisted with the PI that I could have meetings with the current postdocs in the lab. And those meetings were without the PI there. So then you can really ask some good questions. And I think for me, one of the reasons that I'm much happier now in doing better now in the lab that I'm in now is thanks to the fact that I spoke to the other postdocs that were already in the lab. And it's also important because you work together with the other postdocs. So not the PI. The PI is not the only one who sets the tone for how the lab works. So definitely, it's important to speak to the people who are already working in that position in that lab and get good impression from them how it is. One of the things that I also think is maybe important university-wide is that universities need to try to change culture. And one of the things that needs to happen is that if there are PIs who are being really difficult towards their employees, there needs to be a structure there to help people who are maybe in a really hard position. And I think many universities don't currently have that yet. And also when we talk about diversity and protection of people who are from minorities, we don't have many systems in place yet to do that. So I think advocacy and bringing this up to administrations of universities and saying this is important, we need administrations to build more structures into universities so that people can have somewhere to go to ask for help if they need that. That is just really crucial right now. And I think that any form of advocacy that we can do is going to be greatly beneficial because, like we've all mentioned, there are labs where PIs are being really disrespectful to people, and that really does need to change.
So with that context, I think, Jill, you really made a great point, and I appreciate you reminding me of who the we we're talking about. So if we take that big picture we that we just discussed a little bit and then narrow it back down to that individual level, if you how do you help someone, or how do you understand if someone that's around you is having an issue that they're maybe not talking about? So maybe you're in a great space, but a colleague isn't. And how do you point them to support mechanisms, or how do you support them individually? And so maybe this is a question for Obi and maybe Helene, since you're coming from that mental wellness and mental health space. What do you think? Oh, I think you're muted. There we go.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, so this is the year to actually very much speak out. And while there are issues about being worried about your job and productivity or how you might be judged, absolutely nothing is more important than your own mental well-being this year, absolutely. So I know that there's always that pressure to want to do even more than we're asked to. But just looking at all what we have to deliver in the context of losing families, losing friends, trying to keep safe. At the beginning of for us in the UK, we've gone into a second lockdown a few days ago. We had one in March for about a few months. Now we have another one now. People are isolated. At the beginning of the lockdown, we were saying there's a difference between working from home and trying to work at home in the middle of a pandemic. So while we're trying to do the best we can with what we have, I think this is the point for HR and organizations to actually dig deep and say, if people are our biggest assets, that's what costs the most in science, that's what costs the most in healthcare. You know, the people, the staff you have, you spend so much training your, I mean, to get to PhD postdoc levels, MD levels, you spend 10, 12 years training. And these are people who are highly trained, highly skilled, and really, really valuable to your organization. So I think we need to begin to evaluate how we do work in this year. If there's anything this year has taught us to do, is to pause and really think about how do we deliver work and how do we maximize the resources that we have, the greatest of which is people. So for anyone who might be struggling, just like almost every one of us, trying to balance work, trying to balance your deliverables. I know because this is very high impact fields, you know, and we want to just deliver the best we can. I think this is time actually to not be ashamed to seek the help that you need at this point. Like I said, we're going through a lot, not just because of the COVID, but even because of the isolation that has come with the lockdown, the changes it has done to our lives. I doubt if anyone had the kind of summer holidays or vacation they had planned for 2020 this year. You know, so we've had to burn through summer. It's getting cold and dark again now in winter, and we have to keep working. So I think this is actually the year to speak up and say where you're struggling. Many HR and many organizations were innovative at the beginning of the lockdown to offer opportunities to build out your work from home, your offices, trying to tell colleagues to meet up in the park and discuss. What this year has taught us is that, I mean, the person is the most valuable part of the company. You need your staff motivated, and we are the staff, we're the people who deliver on it. So reach out. Everyone works differently, and people have what works for them. But I think this is the year to really dig in and find out what works for me. How do I communicate this to my organization? For instance, I've had colleagues who traveled in March and got stuck where they are. You know, some are in the US, some are in the UK, some are in India, and some are in New Zealand. They've had to work across multiple time zones. For us, for instance, in London, we've had to accommodate difference in time zones for colleagues who are based in the US, who are stuck and can't come back home. You know, so this is the year where all the formal rules around how we work are being evaluated. How exactly do we deliver our work? And so I think this is the time to actually ask for the help you need and just go through with it without trying to cope, you know, and just harden it up. This year actually to speak up and say, I'm struggling here. I will need this kind of support to deliver on my work. And I will really appreciate if I get this kind of help. That's what I think.
I absolutely agree. I think there's still some challenge around stigma of mental health. The isolation certainly is challenging. I know one of the things that I try to do is reach out to friends and colleagues on a on a regular basis. If I think, oh, I haven't thought of that person, or I haven't, connected with that person in a while, I'll send them just a short message. Hey, I hope thinking about you. I hope you're well. Maybe Jill or Bharat, maybe you could comment on, since you have, you run a big team, right? You have a big lab, Jill, or Bharat, you might be on a bigger connected team. How would you, during this time when we are in that isolation, how do we try to keep our thumb on the pulse of who's in risk, and how do we keep that inclusion? I'm particularly worried about losing diversity. Like if we could just status quo and maintain, I think we'd be okay. I really want to be moving forward, but like this is, Obi said, this is a really challenging year, and I'm really afraid of losing more than we're already losing.
So I want to comment on that in two different pieces. The first, for the diversity, our global diversity, and coming from the perspective of being the chair of a PhD program and watching how incredibly difficult, just for mental wellness, This has been having students who are in different time zones, because our international students couldn't make it to the US, but yet many of them, in fact, most of them who were admitted into my program chose not to wait and keep it for next year, right? They were given that choice, but they chose to enroll and therefore are really dealing with the difficulty not just of the pandemic and managing their own mental wellness in whatever country they're in, but this difference in time zone and having to attend class because, a lot of our classes are synchronous. And so they do have to be with the team. They do need to, if they're joining up with a research team and doing a rotation, be in that lab meeting, do whatever in that time. And I think part of what's helpful is, again, recently we had a big conversation for just the international students together with me. I think Helene's point of having these spaces for people to talk, I don't see that the greater organization is so supportive. In part because there's no money. And so in order to be supportive, very often you have to be able to put your money where your mouth is. And so they might want to be supportive. They're saying we need to do things about diversity. We need to support everybody. And then they throw it out there and expect, in some cases, me to take up the mantle. Oh, because you're brown, right? Take up the mantle. And it's like, no, my own mental health is at stake here, my own mental wellness. And so you reached out, but I think making these spaces where people can share is really important. And so for the international students, having that space where they could speak from their own voice, each one is in a different situation. So it's never that everybody's the same. It is not a dichotomy. It is not just this one side versus the other. There's all this nuance, and allowing that space for nuance and people to share, I think helps people feel better. From the respect of even my own mental wellness and my own team. And, my point of trying to keep diversity in the scientific workforce and having those diverse voices in my team. We have our own lab meeting, and very often as a manager, as the mentor, you don't want to seem that you're not strong. You always want to seem strong. But I think it's also important for mentors and managers to allow the team to see that they're not always strong. Tracy, you talked about, you want to do the reaching out, but sometimes you reach out to people and they don't want to reach back, or they do, and they want you to be their therapist. So you also have to recognize where you have to respect your own self and your own mental wellness. And, in one instance, I was having a really bad day in my meeting and just couldn't get it together to get the meeting started, and just had to let my team see that, as I say, I'm doing my best, but today my best isn't really any good. So can you all help? And we always have a check-in, how we are health-wise because of COVID. And I'm like, I think today we need to do a mental wellness check-in. And can you all tell me what you do to pick yourselves up when you're feeling down, because I just can't make it today? Maybe you have something that you can tell me that will help me. I know you think I'm the one who's always so strong, but I'm not strong today. So let's realize that we can all help each other. So I think that allowing each other to help each other and not always having to be the strong one is a good thing.
That reminds me of a lot of the research that's been done by Brené Brown, who's a social science researcher in University of Houston. Amazing books, and I think the vulnerability is and owning that and recognizing that is probably really instructive and healing. And I'm sure that your team may have been surprised at that moment, but I bet that it's made a humongous impact on the way that they will lead and grow in the future. So I just want to, send some kudos for that. also to recognize that, you said, but diversity begins long before grad school and postdoc. So, I wanted to send some kudos for, applauding your program for making the space and making it work for those individuals who wanted to start. And even now, right, when we when we all have so much on our plates, recognizing how much harder it is to handle grad school with time zones and all of that other stuff. But kudos for your program and everything for making that work. And I think that's a model system that we can take forward, right? That and Obi commented on this too, where we all have to do what we have to do, and we all have to have a lot of grace and recognize that there's room for everything if we just take that breath and take that moment. So we've got 8 minutes left. So I want to invite all of you to reflect on our conversation and bring in probably the most, what's the most impactful thing that you can leave with everyone who's watching us live today. And
just a minute, Tracy,
Oh.
before that, yeah,
Oh, we
sorry.
have questions.
Yeah, so I just have a question. So we have one person who wants some advice. Maybe Jill and Helene can help give some insight on this. Now, I mean, we know that like STEM is perceived as a male-dominated field, and there is a sort of notion that women who succeed in STEM have to stand up for themselves or have to be very outgoing. So, what does a person being a female scientist, if that person is not as outgoing or is very soft spoken, how does she navigate herself amongst self asserting men? I mean, how does she succeed? So what advice can you give for people like that?
I have a thought if you guys don't want to jump in, because I've certainly dealt with this too, but you guys are our panelists.
I can go first, but
Yes.
I definitely want to hear Jill's answer as well. You want to go first?
Okay, I'll go really, really quickly. The nice thing about science is it's a bit of a solitary career. So sometimes you can just ignore them and do your work and show them through your work and your writing and speak volumes in that. And that's the simple answer. Just ignore them.
That's definitely also a very powerful answer. I think one of the things that I have done is I've joined the Association for Women in STEM. And for me, that was a great opportunity because, like I said earlier, it helps me a lot if I can speak to other people who are going through the same thing. And then you can talk to each other and support each other. And for me, joining the Association for Women in STEM has been really helpful. And I've made some really great friends there as well. But it's also just about supporting each other. Then you feel stronger in standing up when there is something unfair happening.
I have one more point there. So I know you asked this question about from the women perspective, how do women stand up to these men? But I must say that I think some of the worst bullies I've had in my career when I was coming through were women bullies. So there are women bullies too, and there are certainly white women bullies. And again, it was just like the best was just, okay, I just have to not listen. I can't trust this person's perspective of me, and I'm gonna continue on. So it can be men and women.
I agree with that. I think that you have to find those around you, your colleagues, so peers, but also mentors, and not just the one mentor, but like lots of mentors around you who can support you and help you progress in your career. And just to remember that. Let me just leave it at there. So was there another question? I'm so sorry, I forgot the
Uh,
questions.
no, that's fine. So somebody asked so since a lot more women are joining STEM, so do you all think that in the next 5 to 10 years, the gender bias or the racial bias will eventually fade away?
So I think I can take that. There's a report I just want to quote out of actually. It was done here at UCL, University College London. It's called the 50-50 report. And it tries to look at gender inequality across 200 organizations in health and health policy across the world. Right. So the 2020 Global Health 50-50 report tells us that it will take up to 50 years to close the gender gap in global health or in health leadership across the world. So first, to encourage all the ladies who have an interest in STEM or pursuing STEM, or like our first question, absolutely, we need more women. We can't afford to wait 50 years to close the leadership gap we have in global health. And like Melinda Gates would say, we have to be impatient optimists. We have to do it fast and do it now. So we have a long way to go, and encourage as many people as possible to pursue a STEM career if you're interested there. You're absolutely capable. You can absolutely do it. And just one more data from the report, we're seeing that there's something that's called the 70, 80, 90 glass ceiling in global health. We're seeing that 70% of leadership in global health is held by men, 80% of whom are individuals of high income country, and 90% of whom were educated in high income countries. So it's a 70, 80, 90 ceiling. So we definitely need more diversity in global health leadership. And so as much as we can do to encourage that diversity is crucial at this point. Like I said, we can't afford to wait 50 years to close the gap in global health leadership for men and women. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Is there another question? Otherwise, I have a comment.
No, you go ahead, Tracy.
Sure. So I wanted to sort of tie both of these questions and answers back together, and really highlight that there's a lot of different leadership styles, and I think that it's really important that we recognize for ourselves what is our own leadership style. I had a coach, an executive coach once, and I did my strengths, and my top strength came back as kindness or caring, and I was devastated because I thought, oh my God, how am I going to be the stand up, walk in the room, take charge leader when that's my strength, right? Because I was seeing that in a negative light, even though really and truly one of my other top was positivity. I just couldn't see my way past that. So if you're introverted, or if you're in that, quieter space, own the way that you lead. It may well be servant leadership. And the best piece of advice that my coach said to me is, kindness is never a weakness. Never, ever, ever. And that's always stuck with me. So, thinking about, how we're, having the grace to work with each other and get through this time. And, I hope we never, ever have to go through this again, but I hope that the big lessons that we've learned, really do come out in that space to improve wellness, to improve inclusion, to improve, the way that we balance or integrate our greater spaces. Do we have one more question? I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, I think we are good. Yeah.
Tracy, I
I
just
think we
wanted
can.
to make a comment on your point of leadership. It's time that at this point as leaders, we do not lead by the example of our power, but rather lead by the power of our example. And that example is via kindness, empathy, and compassion in these troubled times.
I completely agree. It was my boss at the time who wanted me to be that walk in the room and own the room style leader. And that's not my style. It's never been my style. I prefer to lift everyone up. I think that, and give credit to everyone around me. I think that speaks a lot more about that's the way I like to lead. So I think you're right. Any last comments?
Yes.
Just to say thanks for being on the panel. For everyone who's struggling, like I said, this is at the beginning, this is an unusual year. Reevaluate your KPIs, reevaluate the expectations with your PI, with your manager, I think where there's a lot of disappointment is when expectations are unmet. So I think if you need to review what the targets are in view of the current circumstances, please go for it, review it. Everyone understands we're trying to make the most of the year. And please ask for help where you need help. This is not the year to do it all alone. We need each other to bond through and get through whatever it is at the end of the year and even pushing into 2021.
Do we have time for a quick question? I know we're running out of time, but we just got a question. So it says, how do we manage learning hard things fast and leading a team very well? If you can just provide some quick pointers to that. Yeah, that'll be our last question.
That's a tough last question.
How do you manage learning hard things well? Find somebody who knows that hard thing better than you and ask them for help for that one. And what was the other part of that question?
So yeah, how do we manage learning hard things and leading a team very well? Like how do, yeah.
Well, I think Tracy just gave us a great example for how do you lead a team well. You find what's your managerial style and you use your managerial style. Be true to yourself. I think there's never any better advice than really being true to yourself. If you're true to yourself, you'll do your best work than if you're trying to be some other sort of person and make that work. So be true to yourself and use that as your strength to help you manage your group.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very fruitful and very insightful discussion. You all were great, and I personally learned a lot from you guys. So thank you so much for doing this. And just a reminder, so all the recordings of these sessions are available in the STEMPeers YouTube channel. So whoever wants to listen to the discussion can go to our YouTube channel and watch the recordings. And yes, so Sophie said that these were all golden advice. So thank you once again, panelists. Yeah, it was great having you all.
Thank you for having us here,
Thank
the
you.
STEMPeers organizers. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Did you take it off from live or do I just leave? I'm gonna leave the meeting. Bye-bye.
I think we can
Yeah,
just go, but
bye-bye.
thank you. Oh,
Thank
Yes.
Thank you.
Well done. I think it is still
Yeah.
live on YouTube.